We look at the big man syndrome as a challenge in African Pentecostalism or Pentecostalism in Africa. And I begin by saying that the big man or big women syndrome, big people person syndrome, of course, syndrome means something that is not very good or something bad. You talk of that is not treatable. It's like a chronic sickness of sorts. So there is this big man syndrome that is crippling religiosity. Whether you are talking of the mainline churches, Pentecostal churches, the now emerging fourth category of Pentecostalism, the so-called African Pentecostalism, I prefer Afro-Pentecostalism. This, there is emerging trend of big men, big women. Of course, when we go to the new religious movements, purely those cultic groups, which are not even religion at all, they are just cult, but they pose as religious groups. That is where the situation is really wanting, is bad. The situation is bad. Because there even, you hear a religious leader is their God, their Messiah. He's everything, the big angel, anything big. And what they say is final. There's no debate, there's no discussion. The big men phenomenon, or big persons phenomenon, or big women's phenomenon, rather syndrome phenomenon, can be manifested through being too powerful, more powerful than you should be. You know, we used to talk of Raif presidency, politically speaking, or dictators of the 19th century, who were beyond. In fact, people even thought they are more powerful than God. You pray with them, you are killed or anything. It may not be physical death as such right away, but even being indoctrinated that if you disagree with them when they are going wrong, they can order God to kill you or take you. Or many things, instilling fear. These big men, big women, big persons instill a lot of fear among juniors. Sometimes they suck at will. Sometimes they promote mediocrity or the way it should not be. Sometimes they harass juniors or the ordinary follower is psyched. I say follower is psyched to think of them as, infallible. There was even time, even Pope was saying to be infallible. By the time Martin Luther came with the 95 Theses, put them on the door of Württemberg when he was teaching the neighboring University of Württemberg. But of course they pronounce Wu for German, Württemberg. But we write Württemberg. And he came and protested the corruption of the church that time. Old habits die hard. What we did last time may come back and trouble us again. So those are some of the things to watch. So in tackling this topic on the big men syndrome, our focus at the moment is Pentecostalism, the big men syndrome in Pentecostalism. But we should not forget that it even cuts across even politics. They are big men. Huyo hawezi kuulizwa kitu. You can't question the big man. Thou shalt not. It may not be written in the constitution, but try one day to question the big man. Can even be killed by guns or anything. They don't ask. Whatever he says, they say is good, because there's a spirit, a negative spirit that comes to overvalue that person, and it kills a democratic culture in the church, in the society, in politics, wherever we are, even at family level. If there is that big man syndrome, we are dead and finished. We are dead and dusted. We are gone. So there should be a level of we can question, we can ask, is this okay? Is this not okay? You can make your contribution, and nobody should be too big that if you try to question what he said, really, you are done. So let me say it's a phenomenon troubling us all. The big man syndrome is a troubling thing as we talk. Allow me to say a few things about it. To an extent, the failure of the traditional African systems, Ubuntu, where the joy of one was seen as a joy to all, and vice versa, is a reason for the emergency of African Pentecostals' involvement in elective politics and the big man or big woman syndrome that is prevalent in some of these ecclesiastical outfits. So this failure of traditional African system or indigenous systems to provide for everyone, to create the joy to everyone and the pain to everyone, that to uphold communality and Ubuntu, humaneness, now has brought a lot of lopsided and confused situation whereby even the political involvement of the clerics is attributed to such. You can see it from, in my view, is attributed to the failure of those traditional structures. When you create identity crisis, where people in Africa are more European than African, or they really don't know where they stand in the mix, now confusion comes in, because we need to study both of them, the very influential cultures of the Europeans and Americans versus our own influential cultures, and sit and teach our people how we should deal with them so that we don't create confusion. I think the failure of education to create a system whereby we are able to sit and dialogue among the various influences that have made their home in Africa, the various influences that have made their new homes in Africa and influenced African people, some by force, some by, by choice. That's something that has created, in my view, this big man syndrome. Sometimes the failure to know the boundary you should stay in, because if it is one group corruptly taking everything in the country, we may say, no. If we get religious leaders in politics, maybe it will be less, because these people are not doing the work of God, those who are calling themselves politicians. That could be a reason. The identity crisis that is evident after the failure of African cultural systems and its unholy alliance with the Western trajectories has created, as I've noted, a huge vacuum in the African worldview that is not yet addressed. We still have not addressed that vacuum that is already created by the identity crisis exists in Africa. Africa is a home of identity crisis. Even Ngugi wa Thiong'o trying to call himself Ngugi wa Thiong'o, not James Ngugi, okay, or Gibedi Mojola, or not Gibedi Mojola of Nigeria, who in 1800 trying to get rid of his African names, and he was a founder of the Native Baptist Church in Nigeria. Those very early days, by 1900, okay, has not really changed much, because there must be teaching, there must be educating people, there must be analysis, deep one, so that people can be able to locate themselves within the mix, within the confusion that is created or was created in Africa. So whatever we start, there will be confusion. The big man syndrome is a disease. It will be there in politics, in church, in Pentecostalism, in mainland churches. There will be episcopal autocracy, a clerical autocracy. There will also be the mob autocracy, okay? Congregational autocracy. There will be dictatorships all over created by this confusion, because you may not know your boundaries until and unless we're able to discuss ourselves and understand ourselves well. In view of this, Ogbukalu, the celebrated Nigerian scholar or student of these areas, has ascertained that the African big men or big persons began after political independence in 1960s, as they viewed freedom from colonialism as an end in itself, rather than a means to an end. They then failed to build institutions, for posterity, and further failed to appreciate that Africa does not need the strong men or strong women or strong persons. Rather, Africa needs strong institutions, not strong people. That is what we failed to do right, according to Karu, right after independence. But I see this as beyond there. I see it as coming with the coming of colonial systems. Okay, that is the time we began all these things unconsciously. The colonial era. That's when the big man syndrome, because it started crashing the system of governance in Africa that were clear that no one was great or in a manner that it could do harm and with impunity and get away with it. There were even ancestral pantheon. There were ancestral curses. There were ways of checks and balances. Yes, quite a number of things. There were medicine men. There were all those people, the specialists who would handle every area. As a result, the strong men, no women initially, built personality cults, and were eventually idolized as God's sent, God's chosen, and unique people of their own kind. You can't get another one like him or her. Oh, we said him first. They would amass instant wealth after independence at the detriment of the increasingly poor citizenry. You know, hence, Africa's post-independence big men amount to a systemic rooting through primitive accumulation of wealth, which is hard to account for, a development that ironically pushes the ordinary folk to revere them as heroes and heroines and messengers of God Almighty. Whatever they did, they are praised. Why? Because people are confused. They don't know what to do. Under such circumstances, bandit economies in the post-colonial Africa have emerged. You know, economies that are built on how you can crush people and survive and make you a kill. You make your root and you are fine. You are idolized when you have made it through hook and crook. Without any moral underpinnings, survival for the fittest economies only make the stronger ones wealthier and the weaker ones become poorer. Hence, African history is replete with cases of failed states, a failure that is squarely blamed on Africa's big men. Initially, we don't blame women, we first blame men, the big men syndrome. That's where we squarely blame the big men syndrome. It is a tragedy when such unfortunate scenarios are replicated in ecclesiastical outfits or in church and religious corners. In such situations, the poor are eventually blocked from legitimate means of survival and are fatalistically forced to continue walking through the precarious valleys of the shadows of death and destruction, as God remains their comforter. Now, the increase of substance abuse, suicide cases, domestic violence, family breakups, alcohol abuse, violence flare-ups, along ethnic lines, constant xenophobic attacks, and other forms of unyama or uburuane or beastly character, beastly conduct, animal-like behavior are symptoms of a volcano that is ready to erupt or, come out. It is a volcano that is about to, to break up and break out. And of course, you know what a volcano is all about, how it can do. So we are sitting on a very explosive bomb, sitting on it. In this understanding, the African Pentecostal big men and big women in the 21st century Kenya is a progression of an alternative to the breakdown of the African cultural systems, whose spirituality was strictly adhered to. Yeah? In a community where a mudhamaki or revered elders or leaders were ontologically seen as holding belief on God, a vacuum cannot be entertained. Curiously, the big person syndrome in the 21st century is visible in both the political and the ecclesiastical circles. And is clearly a concern in modern scholarship. As we study, we must really find a solution to unveiling these syndromes that are coming, the big people syndrome. One scholar by name Anik, in his 2018 publication, has attempted to unveil the cause of the shift of African Pentecostal landscape and the emergence of the big men and big women in the African Pentecostal leaderships by relating it to the national politics, as the African governments fail to address cutting-edge issues facing their respective societies. The African Pentecostals big persons emerge with a promise for a better day. In other words, the failure of the political establishment in the socio-existential realm triggers this shifting of landscapes to an extent. And this means that the church now becomes an alternative government by default, a government that complements the failures of the central government. You see? But even there, you find some confusion. When the same spirit goes to the church, it causes more confusion. Does that make African Pentecostalism the right and salt of the world? Matthew 5:13-17. In an environment where darkness is more than light, or does it compound an already bad situation by adding insult to an existing injury? These are some of the questions we need to ask. Burgess, one scholar by name Burgess, in his 2015 publication, Burgess in 2015 publications has, however, pointed out that even when African Pentecostals participate in elective politics, they do not lose their Pentecostal state and or theological direction. They don't lose their Pentecostal state, even when they become politicians, according to Burgess. This is, however, debatable, as different samplings would provide divergent results. As the African societies look for alternative security and or source of hope, it will be foolhardy to ignore these African Pentecostal shifts in all pillars of culture. You may talk of in areas of economics, aesthetics, areas of family or kinship, areas of religion, areas of ethics, areas of politics, economics, all these. As even the African indigenous systems are holistic and never isolate any department of life. So it will be foolhardy to ignore this African Pentecostal shift in all pillars. So there is also a sense in which culture is dynamic. And when you say culture, it means the total sum of life. And if you think of it, that African Pentecostals are within the cultural systems, they will shift like culture. They will be dynamic and change. So change will always come. The issue is which change? The change is to bring in big people syndrome. Big people who are not questioned. Godlike personalities. That is when we begin to fail, because we are losing out. We are in trouble. Our house is on fire. Now, the challenge of unquestionable obedience. We saw it in Shakahala, Hora here. They could not question the big man who told them, you fast to death, you see Christ. They are eating there. They have a house there. They are eating. The leaders and the people, the militia, to enforce the fasting. And you have sold land and everything. You have brought it to the church. You have nothing at home. You have even crashed with your members of family. You have come to your home. But the big men, they tell you, do what we do what I'm telling you. I'm the final. And if I'm final, I'm looking at you in your eye. You can't change because they are big people. They are looking at you in your eye. You can't do anything but even die, because they have told you stay there and don't eat anything. You are fasting for Jesus. What are you saying? And they told you earlier, so there's also conmanship that may come, and some of them are not Pentecostals. Those are cults who pose as Pentecostals, and they keep coming to confuse the people and actually exploiting the people in the name of Pentecostalism. So the challenge of unquestionable obedience among its adherents to some pocket of African Pentecostal leadership, because it's also there, and whose moral underpinnings raise concerns, is another question altogether. It's another one. So in trying to understand the shifting landscape of African Pentecostalism in the 21st century Kenya, it is necessary to ask the following questions. Have the religious outfits that operated as mere temporal ministries under overseas apostles, overseers, apostles, pastors, general overseers, among other titles, shifted to churches with reverends, bishops, archbishops, as the new titles for their ecclesiastical leaderships? Has the wearing of the new gowns become the new norm? All that, we noted it. Certainly, is it part of the big man syndrome? A big man must wear in a big way, in a different way, in a more, elaborate way that you must see him. Where is the prince of humility in all this? So those are the questions any intellectual will ask himself. And that is not defying, anyway, those big men. I'm small man, I have to obey them, those big men. But to an extent that we are doing the right thing, we are working together. Tuko pamoja na tukienda njia mzuri. Certainly, the 180-degree turn has not taken place, as there are pockets who have retained their conservative stances noted earlier, right into the 21st century, and are the ones of an anonymous person accurate in regard to African Pentecostalism. The man said this, let me quote that man. He says, let me quote this anonymous man. He said, Christianity began as a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. When it went to Athens, it became philosophy. It became a philosophy. When it went to Rome, it became an organization. When it went to Europe, it became a culture. When it went to America, it became a business, and it created a big man or stroke big woman syndrome in post-colonial Africa. All that. End of quote. Thank you. Before I say thank you very much, let me see the last point. So in ending this big man syndrome, that is, we need to think about it. Yes, in light of things like COVID, which came the other day, and some people are even telling us, don't go to hospital, don't even take medicine, it's a global hoax. What are we going to do with this big man syndrome? Because we have to be careful. You have to test the spirit, because even a big man can be misread, big person. Yes, everybody can be misread, and it's dangerous. Yes, yeah, that is it. Now, as we conclude, let me talk about COVID-19. That, COVID-19 in Kenya was announced officially on 13 March 2020. And of course, after that, prophets and their prophetic extravaganza began in earnest to shape up as they expressed their personal and ecclesiastical idiosyncrasies. That is the beginning of the new extravaganza that came in. And this went hand in hand with biblical insights, mainly from the African Pentecostal wing of the church, some of which tried to prove that COVID-19 was a biblical fulfillment. And I'm hearing it's coming in China. They announced yesterday the other day, when was that? On 26. not yesterday, but on 26 May 2023, that is a new variant in China that may hit us again in June 2023. I got scared anyway. But I'm sure from that big man syndrome perspective, somebody can tell me, no, small man, keep quiet. It will not take us anywhere. Okay, it's encouraging, but also we need to go to explore even the scientific background and the whole spiritual. It's okay, both of them. You have to broaden the understanding of these things, not just one way. The others who saw COVID-19 as prophecies that had been fulfilled, as pockets of commentators, calm pastors, viewed it as a punishment for unrepentant Kenyans. Okay? The latter failed to appreciate that it was a global challenge where India, Brazil, China, Italy, France, Spain, Argentina, Turkey, Germany, Russia, Italy, United Kingdom, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Ethiopia, and the United States were some of the most affected countries. They will not tell you that. They just talked of Kenya as if we exist. Kenya exists somewhere not in this universe. It's like we are not in this planet, or not in this planet, or something. Some of the biblical passages that were sent via WhatsApp, the new technology that have been circulated through the social media in public, included the worldwide quarantine proceeds of COVID-19, even from the church, the holy mountain where we meet our God of mercy. It is now the moment to quarantine from every kind of sin, for God to embrace us back. Well, that could be nice. Another one, let us make church a place of worship. Love one another, and fear God. Let us make the world a garden of joy. Let us take a moment with our ears and ask ourselves individually, what is God feeling about us? And they're going to quote Jeremiah 7:3 and then Jeremiah 8:15. All that. Some of them coming from the big men, some of these texts, they would be taken by the members of the congregation without question. Sometimes if they have not done research, they are not educated enough, they will mislead the congregation. Hence, we need to focus on education. It's critical to everybody who is leading us. And I think even setting a degree as, something that we need for any religious leader, degree in areas to do with theology, religion, or something, and counseling, psychology. Some of these things are needed for some of the leadership to take place properly and overcome the big man syndrome. Another critical dimension is the various prophecies made by various well-known African Pentecostal leaderships in Kenya. Noted by one great Kenyan scholar, Damaris Pasitao, I quote her, a 2020 publication. She says, I quote her, self-proclaimed prophet of war has trafficked in fear-mongering threats and has even claimed that he had prophesied the pandemic. He also said it would kill people in Asia because the continent rejected his prophecy. In Kenya, a section of the public has cajoled him to unleash his mighty prophetic powers to fend off the virus. They have also called on him to pray it away. Now, all these things were taking place as COVID was really causing havoc. Pasitao Damaris wondered why there were no spiritual powers to perform miracles and heal coronavirus patients when it is so desperately needed. She went on to cite some African Pentecostal clerics who, in her view, appeared to be too ignorant of COVID-19, and hence they were in a confused state when the government closed down the churches. And she goes on to cite the cases of, you can talk of the examples of one man I don't want to mention, who appeared in the video, one leading Kenyan African Pentecostal leader who was unable to pronounce the word coronavirus, which showed not just his ignorance, but also how ill-equipped he and his ilk are when it comes to offering solutions to such complex 21st century problems. So even this big man syndrome could also be coming as a result of semi-illiteracy. When you get position of power, you think you are bigger than God, and anybody else fighting you is actually fighting God. This illiteracy somehow hidden somewhere. The ignorance amongst the African Pentecostal leaders was further displayed by one man I've mentioned several times from Tigania, a Meru Tigania-based pastor who, a member of the Jesus Winner ministry, who angered Kenyans when he dismissed COVID-19 as a global hoax. Now, quite a number had done this. Quite a number of people who did this, the pastors. And luckily, this gentleman was opposed by his own leaders, the leaders of their church, who said that is his opinion and we don't agree with it. Yes, that was